And we're live.
Welcome to
Welcome to our book club, As You Like It, by William Shakespeare.
One of his lovely comedies, one of his queerest comedies.
It's a really fun time.
It was. I liked this one a lot. I liked it a lot more than I thought I would, just because I don't know, the plot sounded very similar to Twelfth Night, just in like that it was whenever he has a dressing plot, it's like I feel like it's everyone compares it to Twelfth Night. Like I know Celine is very similar to this too. I know we haven't read that one yet, but I've seen it. And it's the girl. But I really liked this. I actually liked the play more than Twelfth Night. I thought it was funnier.
Yeah, I thought it was a really fun time, and I enjoyed how much we saw of like the love interests talking together.
Yeah, I thought it was very funny and very like witty. Like everyone, like the dialogue. Again, it wasn't like the monologuing that like his tragedies always have.
Yeah, which was good because there's kind of more of a cast feel.
Yeah, I like when his comedies, like that is the thing I liked the most about Taming of the Shrew was how quick the dialogue was, and then it was the same with The Tempest. Like it goes really quick. I think while the monologuing format works well for tragedies and histories for his comedies, like I think Midsummer Night's Dream is fun and Twelfth Night is fun, but they both are very, very monologue-y and like
and very like that makes it kind of slow because like with the comedies you want it to be like back and forth, ha 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 ha.
Like if you're watching like a sitcom or something, like it's gonna be really like on top of one another. And I thought this, along with like The Tempest from last month, we're good at that, at being really funny, like back and forth.
Yeah, I agree.
I liked how queer it was. A lot of the queer coding. I looked up like if you just like type into Google, like I looked up like queering of As You Like It, and I'll find some of the articles now that we can like discuss when we get to characters. Because I mean, as soon as we started reading it, I was like, all right, well, Celia and Rosalind they're in it here. This is gay.
Yeah.
It's considered like one of his most, from the research I did, one of his most queer coded plays, which I thought was interesting.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think it also
because a fun fact is that Virginia Woolf's Orlando, which is very queer and everything, that's basically she got the name from this play.
Yeah, I wondered if that's where she got it from.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think I read some stuff on what was the one I was just looking at? There's an article from like 2013 on it's called like Simmons.libguides, and it's just like little discussion topics about Shakespeare plays. And they talk about the queering in Twelfth Night and As You Like It, since they're similar, and how it kind of like rejects the male gaze and focuses a lot on the female gaze, especially more in Twelfth Night a little bit, but like how if these other women are so easily thinking this other clearly woman is a man because they've been told to think it's a man based on how she's presenting her gender, it then like destructs the male gaze because it's like that's still like Rosalind's still a woman. She put on pants and a hat. And then what is it, Phoebe who's like in love with Rosalind? It's Phoebe, and then Audrey is in love with Touchstone. But Phoebe and like fully believes. Well, and I mean the movie we'll get to, but like Orlando fully believes, and then it's the bisexuality of he's clearly into what he is thinking is a man.
He's like you're pretending to be Rosalind, but you're like not doing anything.
You're into it, sir. Like you are into it. Like in like in Twelfth Night, they again also had that kind of energy, but like it was always like accidental. Like they were presenting as like friends. Like they were friends for in this, like you met a stranger in the woods who was, and then
she's also just like, pretend I'm your love interest.
And he's like, got it. And then he like straight up was like, I would kiss you and do that. And I'm like, sir, which then it, it's like, so maybe he still is registering that's a woman, but gender's a presentation because, again, in Shakespeare stories, women put on a hat and everyone's like, that's a man. And it's like, no, it's
the bare minimum. And they're like, wow. Completely new person.
Cut your hair. It's the Mulan thing. Like, how did what is it, Lang? How do you never notice? Like,
I mean, in that one, at least she tried. She like.
Oh yeah, she made. Well, and also like it was it was normal to, like no one binds their chest either in Shakespeare things. Like you think about, it's crazy that a Disney cartoon like went to the effort to show her binding her chest. And like that, like obviously binding is like not safe if you don't like buy a binder. So like back then, obviously they wouldn't have had those. But that's an interesting thing that they
show.
You
never try to hide it.
In 12th Night, in the one we watched, I think
in the one we watched, yeah.
Well, in the 12th Night we watched, she like made a fucking effort to appear like a man, and so you could understand. Yeah, and she wore like a fake mustache. I could understand a little more how in a time where gender presentation was everything, with the amount Viola did. Also, though, even in the text of 12th Night, it made it clear that she like really tried to hide it. Whereas in this, it's like she was just trying to they were just trying to get through the city to the woods. Like it's not like they were really that set on like coming across as men until she saw Orlando and then was like, but hit on me. Like, why didn't you just tell him you were Rosalind? Like that's an interesting.
Right? It's a weird choice because like they're not really hiding from anyone.
Well, like, and Orlando's like not on her uncle's side, so it's not like he's gonna turn her in. It's kind of like this weird coquettish, like, I wonder if he really likes me, which like he already like wrote all over the fucking trees that he did. So
seems pretty obvious he does.
I feel like so many Shakespeare characters, especially in the comedies, read as like bisexual, I guess you would say pansexual, since like in the end it turns out that like the gender didn't matter. They were in love with the person no matter how they were presenting. You know, whereas like I guess if it was to be read as bisexuality, it would be like they would still fully like believe this person is that gender. Whereas it's clear that like in this, like he was falling in love with Rosalind, even though like I feel like it seemed he suspected there was like something like off about her and her drag. The drag in the movie we watched was not drag, but it's also, I feel like since the theater was already like a place of like, you know, the early like theater is where, you know, drag in a way began, since men had to play all the parts. Is that the choice to like then have the male actor playing a woman, then be a woman who's dressing as a man, then play opposite another man who, like, it's just a really queer setup. There's a lot of layers there, and it's very queer. And the fact that it was so normal to do that, like so many of his plays involve a woman cross-dressing, and I think that's interesting. Like
Shakespeare, you wanna tell us something?
You want to share with the class? Like so many. Are there anywhere men cross-dress? I feel like no, there aren't. I mean, the men had to cross-dress to put on the shows like that.
Yeah. And I think it tends to be women, which is interesting because then it kind of makes you think about like masculinity and everything, because there is this woman pretending to be a man where like the women are usually silent, but now it's like she is taking on a more powerful role almost.
Yeah, there's like a quote from the Sean Maguire book, Every Heart a Doorway, where they say, we notice the silence of men, we depend upon the silence of women. And so it's like, yeah, these women, these are the means in which they can have power or agency. And it's interesting with the gender presentation of these comedies, because like nowadays, like, because people know that transgender is like a common thing and cross-dressing and gender performance, the people who are against it are like looking for it and like feel like angrily bamboozled if they like in the musical Kinky Boots that I watched with Austin last week, this one character thinks that Lola is a cis woman, and when this character learns that Lola goes by all pronouns in the musical, but identifies as a gay man who likes to dress in drag, but we still use like she pronouns or go by Lola, the drag name. So when this character learns that Lola is technically a cis gay man who just likes to dress presenting as a woman, he's like disgusted and offended. And I think it's interesting that in Shakespeare comedies, when these presumably powerful straight cis men learn that they did in fact have feelings for someone they thought was a guy the whole time, and it turns out with a girl, they're never like, they don't ever have qualms about the fact that like a girl was pursuing them presenting as a man. You know what I mean?
They're always just like, oh, well, you're a woman, so it's okay.
And they're also always just like, it's not even that they're always like, oh, you're a woman. It's just like, oh, it was you. Like in 12th Night, he had never met her before. But in this, since he'd already met Rosalind, he was just like in 12th Night.
This one, I felt like there wasn't, I don't know, maybe this is just me, but like there wasn't enough like payoff in that final marriage scene because she's like, I'll go get her, and then she just leaves and comes back, and it's like it's her, and she just like at like her male form just like disappears forever. Yeah, and like I guess you're supposed to assume that like she told them and stuff, but I kind of want like her to like take off the hat and be like, it's me, got you, bitches.
If you were to like stage a production of it, it would be cool if she was like, I'll go get her, and then like walked behind a tree and just like took off her hat and put her hair down and came around, like something cute like that, like I'll go get her. It would be interesting to stage this in a way where like Orlando suspected all along, or even to like portray Orlando as like openly queer, and so she wonders if like he only liked her because she was presenting as a man, and then in the end be like, I just loved you, like it didn't matter. Because in 12th there is still like the moment of relief that the Duke seems to have. They're like, oh, okay, I didn't almost make out with a man in the bath. Whereas in this, Orlando very much seems to have the energy of he just loved Rosalind regardless. Like it didn't matter how he got to fall, or just that he did. Which is why I think I liked
just like her personality.
Because there's still like that big relief and everyone shows at the end of 12th Night. Like Helena Bonham Carter's character in the movie is literally like down to marry that guy she barely knows just because she fell in love with Viola, but Viola's a girl, and this like.
Well, here's the male version, so it's all good now.
He's like, you've never met him,
but he looks just like the girl,
so it's good to go. Yeah, I thought I love this scene where they're like, Phoebe's like, an eye for Ganymede, and Orlando's like, an eye for Rosalind, and then Rosalind's like, an eye for no woman, and it's like, guys. Also, I looked this up.
But also, like, that's also, like, very obvious. She, like, because what are the other people thinking? If they don't think that she is, like, a woman, they're just like, oh, so he's gay. Cool.
They must think he's gay and that it's fine. Well, the thing is, like, there back then, again, like, the theater is just so gay in its creation. And for like this to be a place where like everyone was just, it was the norm that you were gonna go literally watch like men kiss other men on stage and men dress as women, you know, in a presenting way as women. And it was just the norm. Like clearly, like there's always gay people in the theater now. There was back then. So to just like slip it into the play and be like, an eye for no wit, like, so then what are they thinking? Like you said, that he's gay or he's asexual? Like, because apparently none of them suspect that's Rosalind in pants. So.
Yeah, so it's like, do you just think he's not going to date her anymore? Like, what is their perspective? Because they don't even like react to that. They just kind of ignore it. They're like, so true.
They're like, all right, interesting. So this is interesting. So when Rosalind says she'll be called Ganymede, I was like, that's so weird.
Oh, yeah.
And I
that's because he's the Zeus's lover. And
and it's also the name of one of Jupiter's moons. Like that's why it's the name of the lover, and because Jupiter is just Zeus in Roman mythology.
Yeah.
And then also the Aliena.
Well, that's why it's the name of the moon.
Yeah, and it's like, so it's like the light of your life, like sun and moon, kind of like, so that's the queerness in their relationship too with Celia and Rosalind, because everyone's constantly like, they're even closer than sisters. Women have never been this close. They're constantly like, we sleep in the same bed, and
they're like, let's just run away together.
Yeah, they're like, she's literally like, I'm wealthy and a sole inheritor, but I'm actually gonna be like, I'm out just to go be a peasant, and then they go get a cottage in the woods, like a bunch of cottagecore lesbians. That's the gayest opening.
Yeah, and she's just like, oh, I love you, like, let's go.
Yeah, like literally, there's just no way.
Then they have sister, so it's totally fine. It's totally no homo sisters.
Well, yeah, like in the beginning, Rosalind says, what think you of falling in love? And Celia says, marry, I prithee do, to make sport withal, but love no man in good earnest. I'm like, okay, so love a woman in good earnest? Like,
yeah, it's like kind of the same thing as like at the end when it's like, I will love no woman. It's like,
yeah, and at the beginning, Celia's like, love no man, and it's like, again, like remake this and she picks Celia in the end or something. I don't know, but there's literally, like, I looked it up, and there's literally an like article by Andrews University that's called "Never Two Ladies Loved as They Do: Queer Theory in the As You Like It Celia," and this person literally wrote like a full-on like 50-page research paper all about how queer that is, and I was like, that's what we love to see. That's what we love to see.
Yeah.
You want to talk about characters? Do you want to talk about characters?
Yeah.
Who was your favorite?
I really liked Rosalind. I liked, like, even though like I was portraying her, so maybe I'm biased, but I really liked her. I thought she's one of like the best female characters we've read so far.
I think she's for sure.
Yeah, like she had such a big presence in the show, which was really cool because like even though Shakespeare does typically have like at least a few strong females in his plays, like this was one of the ones where I was like, wow, okay, cool. She has like a very big role. Because usually like there's ones where the women like they have a big role, but then like they're just kind of there and they don't say much. But like she has like these like really good discussions. Like I really liked reading with you as Orlando, like our like little back and forth. Like I thought those were like so good and like so cute and everything.
Yeah, I really liked the wood scene. I showed my sister some clips because her undergrad was in acting, and so she studied Shakespeare, and she As You Like It's her favorite Shakespeare play. And so I showed her us doing like the wood scene when it's like, say you, what o'clock is it? And she was like, oh, this is my favorite scene because it's like the way they meet each other is so it goes very differently than how that scene goes in most of his comedies where people meet in the woods, and it's like always an equal playing ground. Mm-hmm. And like you said, like, yeah, like Lady Macbeth and like Ophelia are like seen as, you know, the biggest Shakespeare women, but like Lady Macbeth dies like well before the end of the play, as does Ophelia, and even when they're on stage, like they don't have a ton of things to say. They're like iconic.
They're supporting.
Like Rosalind's in no way seen as like one of the, like you wouldn't know her if you didn't know Shakespeare already. And I think she should be a bigger deal because she was really funny and really witty.
And she was the main character, like her and Orlando were the main characters.
Women are never, even in like Romeo and Juliet, like they say Romeo first. Like it's like the fact that she was the main character. I really like Touchstone, but I always like the fool characters.
I always like the fool characters too.
They're funny. They're always so funny. Michelle was really funny doing like the like bitchy girl voice for the fool, because that is like the energy that the fools have. I think my favorite fool is still the one in 12th Night, and again the movie version we watched, he was the best. That was my favorite one. It really relies on that actor. Like I liked the actor in this version we watched too, but they kind of cut down Touchstone screen time in the one we watched. But in this, I loved the vibe of just basically like the queer women and obviously the queer-coded best friend all just go into the woods. They're like, fuck this heterosexual norm in this kingdom. We out. Like, it's literally also, I was looking up also just literally saw people on Tumblr talking about how like the rejected Duke, the banished Duke goes into the woods of Arden, and it's this safe space that more and more men just keep coming to every day because they're accepted there. I was like, Shakespeare's really out here just being like, there's a pride party in the woods of Arden, and all these people, like specifically men, are going there. And I just thought like, that's interesting. I think I said to you, we were watching, I was like, I would love to have like a Shakespeare Halloween party in the woods. Everybody come as a Shakespeare character.
It'd be so fun.
In the woods. That's my new goal, to do that one day. But yeah, I thought Rosalind was the best too. She had so many funny lines.
Like she was genuinely funny, and I felt like she had like a real personality, which is hard in some Shakespeare plays. Women don't usually get personalities. No, all
have the same personality, recycled over and over again. Like Ophelia and Juliet are the same person, and like what are the women in Pericles and a Winter's Tale? Couldn't tell you.
No.
Cordelia is
in one of them.
One of the sisters in King Lear is like very similar to Lady Macbeth. Whoever the oldest one is.
There's Cordelia, who's the youngest, and then there's Goneril and Regan.
Regan and Goneril are very much just like Lady Macbeth. You barely even see the women in Julius Caesar. They're each there for like a scene and then kill themselves. And it's like the women also be killing themselves. The women be killing themselves in Shakespeare's play, or they're incredibly clueless. Like the women in 12th Night, like Viola's clearly fooling everyone, but like I can't remember the name of the woman that falls in love with Viola, but she's fucking clueless, and it's like, how are you falling this easily? But
I also one, like, she was smart and like she knew knew everything and like was kind of on top of it, which was really cool to see.
I really liked it. I thought it was really funny, and like you said, she's so present. Like she's in almost every scene once she shows up.
Yeah.
And I liked Celia. Like I thought Celia was a good supporting character. Like a lot of times,
I like their bond.
A lot of times if there's two women, like the most iconic is like Juliet and the nurse, there's still like very clearly the power imbalance because one is almost always in like a servant role. Like when we get to
and then there's also like the age balance as well. But like they're around the same age.
When we get to like some future plays like Othello and Antony Cleopatra, which I've read before, it's a similar thing where they're similar ages actually, but one of them's still like in a servant role. So this was like one of the early times where we read one and both of the women were like of the same like stature in society, so you got to see two women theoretically of like their own independent means choose what to do with their life. And like, well, and just like when Celia's like, let someone else inherit, he'll have to find another heir, like I'm going with you. That's very romantic too. I don't know how that cannot be read romantically. Like she was like gonna have something very few women have and inherit all this stuff. And you can find another heir, I'm going with you. Like I loved it.
Me too. And it's like also just kind of like I felt like all of their like banter and everything. I know I said that already, but like
it's good banter.
It was just fun, and like it kind of showed that they were like lighthearted, and it made it more interesting to read and watch.
Also, just super relatable when Rosalind's like, he said he'd come today, and he's like an hour late, and she's like freaking out, and he's like, I said I'd come like within the hour, and it's within the hour, and I'm like, what's like? They clearly, I feel like we forget how young Shakespeare characters are meant to be at times. Like they were cast by older people in the movie, but they're not supposed to be that old. They're like college-aged kids in this, and it's just fun. It's a fun play. I like that it didn't really get too heavy. Like sometimes I feel like his comedies, he will shove really dark themes into them, and it doesn't always work. And I'm like, okay, calm it down. But no, she was fun. And then Touchstone's just funny. Like there's not a lot to his character. I just think he's funny.
I agree.
I also liked, oh my God, what's the name of the old guy that travels with Orlando? Hold on. What is his name?
John?
Who I forget. The old guy who travels with Orlando, I thought was really funny. I'm blanking on his name. Hold on.
Duke Senior?
Maybe. Hold on. Hold on. Why don't I remember this now? I think it might be. Now I can't find it. Adam.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I thought I liked that too.
Yeah, it was a fun one.
We've kind of like already talked about the plot a lot. Is there anything else you want to say about the plot?
I thought this was one of the better like cross-dressing kind of plays, just because I felt like other than the fact that there was like the bare minimum done in the version we watched to disguise, I thought
when we get to that, I
guess the plot's a little bit confusing at parts because you're like, why do they need to dress up and everything? Like, why they don't really need to do this? Like, but sure,
it's like
fun, and that's all that really matters.
I definitely felt like the Touchstone and Audrey thing was a little unnecessary Like, I don't know, it felt like one too many threads, because I remember when we got to that, I was like, what is this adding? I was like, what's the point of this for this? Oh, that was the other character I like. Jacques is the one who's like always sad. And when she was like, you're sad, and I was like, I relate. I was like, that makes sense. I looked up more on the lib guides of cross-dressing in Shakespeare's women and why they do it. And it's talking about like what you said, power, and that they do it to choose their own path in life, and how
it kind of gives them more control, because like men have all of the control in society, so then if women are dressing up as men, they would be treated differently.
Apparently there's a lot of books on the topic, apparently, about the history, because Shakespeare, apparently it was a thing that women would actually dress in drag, or not in drag, but would cross-dress back then in order to do things. There's actually, you know, the musical Something Rotten?
Yeah.
Have you seen it? There's like
I've listened to it. I haven't seen it.
Okay, I have a totally legal recording if you want to watch it. There's a joke about Shakespeare and cross-dressing in that, where like the main character's like family is poor, and the wife's like always trying to do stuff to get the money because the playwriting's like not working out. He's always like, that's not a job for a woman. Like, I don't want people to see my wife doing that, think I'm not a good husband. So she just starts cross-dressing. And because he's like never home, like one day he's walking home from the theater, and like this like guy's walking by like carrying lumber, and he's like, oh, excuse me, and the person's like, oh, no problem, and he's like, what, honey? And she's like, what? I got a job. Like, and she's just treating it like she just went out and got a job at like Target or something. She's like, it's not a big deal. Like, I went and got us a job. Like, nobody knows I'm a woman. And everyone's like, oh, good for you.
That's funny.
What are some of the themes, do you think?
I guess that idea of power as well, kind of like what we talked about like that imbalance. And then also, like, I think the idea of like love and like what it means to love someone, because they go through that, and like all these different like it's not it's like a
like
yeah
I definitely think it like I said earlier, it has the like love knows, like, because again, like no one once they're in the woods, it's like everyone's equal. Nobody cares theoretically about anyone's gender, anyone's social standing, how much wealth everyone has. Like, it's this great equalizer. Whereas like in other cross-dressing comedies, there still always seems to be a point where like someone has to be brought up to someone else's level or brought down, or that's always a player. But because everyone has met in this off the grid place that's existing outside of the society's norms, no one cares about any of that. It's all just like falling in love with who the person is, which is like interesting, because like, you know, it works out in the way that like in something like Romeo and Juliet, like they can't just be in love with who they are, because like the world dictates otherwise. And in this, everyone's like, fuck it. Like,
exactly. And I think kind of building on that idea, that like city life versus like
country life
in the forest. That idea of like the country is kind of the great equalizer, because in the city there's all the status and rules and regulations and everything that they have to conform to, but out there they don't have to really worry about that, and they're kind of escaping all of those predestined things.
It's also like you said with like power is at the end, when the Duke realized, the other Duke, the one who took power, realizes that like power means nothing if people don't want to follow you, because like I stripped the banished Duke of all his technical power, but then he went into the woods and people gave up everything to follow him, including my own daughter. It's like, so what is power if people don't love you back? Essentially, the idea of like, you can take power all you want, but if the people don't, if you're not just to rule, kind of thing.
Yeah, if people don't actually follow the power, then it means nothing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like, I like the ending a lot with that it wasn't just like, okay, well, fuck it. Like, I also like, that's another reason I like Jacques, is the theme of like it's like the saying from Doctor Who where he's like, life is a pile of good things and bad things, and the bad things don't make the good things any less important, is Jacques very much like, you know, life can be very sad sometimes. And because he's like, but my sadness doesn't like take away from everyone else's happiness and vice versa. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I guess the last one we could talk about would be like the idea of deception. That's kind of a big one in Shakespeare's work. And especially like within the cross-dressing ones where like they dress up as a man and everything. It's like that idea of like falling for someone or like kind of deceiving someone for more information because she continues to be like, so this Rosalind girl, you really seem to like her. And it's like, yeah. And it's like, well, you asked about yourself and he doesn't know. So like, that's not very fair to him.
I also think it shows the double-edged sword of societal sexism because, like, okay, Rosalind and these women in these plays, they dress as men for the power that women don't have. But then when Rosalind's upset whilst presenting as Ganymede, Celia's like, you can't cry. You're a man. Men don't cry. Men don't feel these strong emotions. And it's like, so that shows the power that like society takes away from men that causes like such toxicity. So then when like Orlando's with her presenting as Ganymede and she's like, be passionate, be emotional, he like literally doesn't know how because
like, I don't even know what you mean.
Like the only passion that's seen as like okay for men to display is anger. And that's like literally like still the case today. And so to show like it's this clever trope Shakespeare used. It's like that was easily played on the surface as like a joke. And, you know, literally that's where the term A Comedy of Errors comes from, is from the play he has by that title. And like so many of his plays, like the jokes are from miscommunication and misunderstanding. Everyone falls in love with the wrong person because of how everyone's mispresenting themselves. But that it's also showing like society oppresses women's rights and oppresses men's emotions. Like,
and he's saying something true there about like what happens in society and everything.
He's making a commentary on the world, but it's also like
the smart cookie.
He was a smart guy. There's a reason we're still talking about it.
Yeah, and I think that idea, I think it's really interesting how a lot of these, like especially the ideas in this one, kind of still like are shown. Like you can see them today, even still, which is cool because like I mean like in some of them it's like hard to read and everything, and with this one I felt like it was pretty easy to read as well. Like, with the quick nature of it, it's easy to understand, and it's still you can still relate it a lot to today pretty easily. So I think this one is a really good one, especially considering how, like, I feel like this one isn't as well known. There are a lot more that are like much more well known.
I think so Night is the most popular cross-dressing, mostly because of the Amanda Bynes movie. She's the man.
Yeah, and it's like, which makes sense, but also it's interesting that like this one isn't more popular considering like how easy it is. Like I'm surprised people don't like teach it in schools and stuff because this also is really easy to understand.
It's just better. Like I would just say it's objectively better than 12th Night, and I don't know if you've read or seen Cymbeline, but I've seen it and it's okay. Like it's not, I mean, Cymbeline is so close to 12th Night. Like this, the cross-dressing theme is there, but there's not really any other similarities. I feel like this play took some of the best themes from his other comedies. Like it has the everyone's in love with the wrong person for Midsummer Night's Dream, and it has the cross-dressing confusion of 12th Night. Because, you know, even like deception is used for a second in Romeo and Juliet for like him to get into the party and they don't know who they are. So, yeah, I think this one's, like you said, the text is just much easier to understand than a lot of his plays. And it's shorter than a lot of his plays. And it should, it should be taught. And Rosalind's just one of the best girl characters. And I like more young women would like Shakespeare if they were like, I remember when I was in high school, like the plays we read Romeo and Juliet, but then we read Caesar and Macbeth, which like, as an adult now I like them, but as like a teenage girl, I didn't want to just constantly read stuff that was all about adult men.
Yeah, we read Midsummer Night's Dream, Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, and something else, I think.
I really liked it because you remember it so vividly.
Yeah. I think it might have just been those three.
Yeah, I only read 3 in high school too. We didn't read any in middle school or anything.
Yeah, we didn't either. We read one each year kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was a good time. But I enjoyed it because of like the different ways that we would do it. Like with Macbeth, I had like my thing that I was tracing through the play. So like I traced the hands throughout the play and everything. So like that made it interesting. But I agree, like this one would be like really cool to read considering it has such prevalent women in it, and like it's easy and it's just kind of fun. And I feel like when you're learning Shakespeare, you don't really want to read it because it's difficult to get into. But with this, it's like what they're saying is pretty much what you're getting. Like,
well,
you kind of
you're the only person I've talked to who got to read a comedy of Shakespeare's in high school. Everyone else I've talked to who read Shakespeare in high school never got to read a comedy. It was always the tragedies. Yeah, most people
we read Midsummer's Dream freshman year. That everyone pretty much read it.
Yeah, and we read Romeo and Juliet, which like obviously I love that play, but and then we read Julius Caesar, which I didn't like Romeo and Juliet at the time. I did like Julius Caesar at the time. I think that's the easiest one to understand what they're saying dialogue-wise. Mm-hmm. And then we read Macbeth, and I learned later we read a censored version of Macbeth. Like scenes and jokes have been taken out because our school district was like, and I'm like, well, then what's the fucking point? I didn't know we'd read a censored version until I saw Shakespeare in the Park that was traveling, and I was like, where the hell? This was not. And I was very confused. And it's like, I feel like the comedies are so much easier to read and understand.
Yeah, and they're a lot of fun.
Like when we like get to like fun dialogues next, one of my favorite lines is where Orlando's talking to Jacques, and Jacques says, your love's name is Rosalind? He says, yes. And he says, I do not like your name. And he says, there was no thought of you when she was christened. Like, I think that line is so funny. Like, I think the play is hilarious. Like, I laughed out loud reading that line when I was reading the play before we did our live stream a few weeks ago. So what was some fun dialogue that you liked? I marked some. We have
all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players.
I liked how David delivered that line. That was funny. And then when they were like, all the men and women and non-binary people are merely players. I have the more pity that fools may not speak wisely what wise men do foolishly. I thought was just really good wordplay and meter in this play. I
pray you do not fall in love with me, for I am falser than vows made in wine.
I love that. Whose loves are dearer than the natural bond of sisters. I could shake them off my coat. These burrs are in my heart.
Oh, how bitter a thing it is to look into happiness through another man's eyes.
I was too young that time to value her, but now I know her. If she be a traitor, why so am I. We still have slept together. Still we went coupled and inseparable.
Do you not know I am a woman? When I think, I must speak.
I love that.
Yeah.
When I'm a woman, when I think I must speak. Hold on, I have a few more that I marked. If I could turn to the goddamn page. And thou, thrice-crowned queen of night, survey with thy chaste eyes from thy pale sphere above thy huntress name that my full life doth sway.
Most friendship is feigning, most loving mere folly.
Love is merely a madness.
I have that one as well.
I love it. For the truest poetry is the most feigning, and loves are given to poetry, and what they swear in poetry may be said as lovers they do feign. I really like that. Oh, yeah. They say you are a melancholy fellow. I am so. I do love it better than laughing. Those that are an extremity of either are abominable fellows. Oh, and then I have at the end, I really like continuing with like gender bending and the women getting power, that the epilogue is spoken by Rosalind when the epilogues are never spoken by women. And it starts with her saying, it is not the fashion to see the lady the epilogue, but it is no more unhandsome than to see the lord of the prologue. I was like, girl, I thought that was like the biggest like.
Yeah, when I read that for the first time, I was like, ooh, there you go.
And I love that it opens that way. Like, it is no more unhandsome than to see the man the prologue. Like, and I feel like that goes back into the, like, what I said earlier with the, like, we notice the silence of men, we depend upon the silence of women. Like, it had never even occurred to me until I read that we had never read a female character be the epilogue. I was like,
kind of thought about it, but like hearing her like directly say it, I was like, ooh.
I guess I'd never registered it because since with the group we don't play to gender anyway, you know, there were times that you or I or another girl in the group had read the epilogue just because that's how we were cast to do it. And I don't think women have ever read the prologues either. And so I think that we've read, obviously we haven't read all 37. But I think that's
it also depends on like how you think of the chorus, because like the chorus could be
the chorus can be women, but you know, sometimes a lot of times the epilogue is like we did Tempest, and the epilogue is specifically spoken by Prospero, and stuff like that.
What do you think about
or Gowers?
Gower,
the fools are always men. So I like her basically saying like, you know, the men can tell you how the story starts, but I'm the woman and I'll tell you how the story ended. And I just and I like that kind of ties into the famous line, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. As she's like, this story and we were players, but like it's that cliche
thing that too, which is cool.
Of like, it's that cliche thing of like, no one gets to say how your story ends except you. And so that was kind of like that's kind of when you understand that Rosalind dictated the story to the audience, not any of the men, and being like, there will be no misconception in how like my love story went. Like you know, like all the other.
I think that her saying like it's not the fashion to see the lady, the epilogue and everything. I think that's kind of like acknowledging like her like talking about the epilogue at all is kind of saying, hey, like all of us women were still here and everything, and like kind of acknowledging that they hold like this important place in the story, and acknowledging that it is a story, but it holds kind of power, you know.
There's a quote from the suffragette movement that's like, we're half the world, you can't ignore us forever. And so it's kind of you know, like obviously Shakespeare by today's standards would like not be enough of a feminist, but by his standards of his time, he was really radical in how he wrote and viewed women. And so to write this woman who, because the story does start with like a fight between Orlando and his brother, and then to just end with a woman saying, you know, as she's pushed these men to like essentially be open with their feelings the whole play, to now be like, it's my story. This is how it ends. Women are always here. Women have been telling stories the whole time. You just haven't been listening. Like,
and also the fact that she says like, if I were a woman, I would kiss as many of you as had beards that pleased me, complexions that liked me, and breasts that I defied not.
She was really like hot girl summer. If I was
she's like, I'm out here.
She's really out here doing it. No, I really.
She also kind of acknowledged that like men can feel emotions when she's like, I charge you, O men, for the love you bear to women. And as I perceive by your simpering, none of you hates them. And it's like, you can feel your emotions, and she's kind of still pushing that idea at the end there, which is cool.
Yeah, it's the idea of like, you know, we don't need to mock women for feeling emotions and being openly emotional. You could just do it yourself. Like, it's only seen as a thing worth mocking because women are the only ones who do it openly. Like, I've always said to my sister that whenever like people like put away like their sadness and like work through grief or any kind of intense emotion, people are like, oh, like you're so brave, you're so strong. I like have always thought it's more impressive when people are not afraid to be openly emotional, like to openly cry or openly be upset. And
that's like in the show I'm watching, they went through like this big like tsunami and everything, and this little kid is like dealing with it because like he was like in this tsunami, he like went through a lot. And his dad is like, he's not talking about it. Like, what's going on? Like, I don't know how to deal with it. And and like the therapist lady was like, well, have you shown him that you can be sad? And like, that's a thing that you can do. And he's like, maybe show yourself that like you're upset about it and it's hurt you and everything. And like, then they actually like have a genuine conversation about it and everything that's happened over like the last couple months. And it was like really nice to see, because it was like them opening up and like dealing with their issues. And I think that's kind of also like the idea that it's here, like, you know, like people need to talk about it.
Yeah, like when in the beginning, after like Rosalind's father has been banished and Celia says, you know, be merry, and Rosalind's like, I can't, like I'm devastated, I can't just pretend I'm happy. Can't be like, you know, Beetlejuice the musical when she's like, every day they're staring at me like, I'll hurry up, get happy. And it's like the idea of it's like Rosalind, like you said, she just refuses to like change herself to fit the world standards. It's like, maybe she's not what's wrong. Maybe it's how the world expects women to behave and expects men to behave as
well. Do we want to talk about the movie?
Okay, yeah, that was something.
They made a lot of choices in this film. We watched the 2007 version by Kenneth Branagh,
which starring Bryce Howard and Daniel. I forget his name. He was in a lot of things. I forget his name. Daniel Okoye, I think is his name, and like Kevin Kline, and just a bunch of people. I remember like 10 minutes in, I just went, "Are we in Japan?" And you were like, "I think so." There was no reason, but apparently, a fictional English colony in Japan, bunch of white people in kimonos.
So that was a choice.
The absolute least was done to make Bryce Howard look like a man. It is not.
What they did was they went like this. Hold on.
They did that. Got a hat.
I'm a man now.
Literally, like, because I had said, like, yeah, again, in 12th
Night, the bare minimum.
In 12th Night, she had never met Viola before, and Viola binded her chest, put on a fake mustache.
And she chopped off all her hair.
So, like, it was believable. You could buy that she was just a very effeminate-looking man. He had just fucking seen Rosalind, like,
and,
a day ago.
He obviously, like, very vividly remembered her, considering he's writing all these, like, love notes on the trees and everything. Like, he is thinking about her all the time. He's like, oh my God, Rosalind, she was amazing. And it's like, you saw her.
Well, and then in the scene in the movie where he like walked in on her and she's in the creek bathing and her hair's practically all the way down, working so hard to cover her chest. Like, well, and again, and then when it cut to the wedding scene and she's like, again, where'd they get all the kimonos if they're in the middle of the woods? And she had her hair up and you were like, okay, well, her hair is still back. So what now? Is he like, oh,
yeah.
Woman? If not dressed,
like, her hair was up differently. Like, sure, like before it was like this, but then it was up again, just like in a fashionable way. And it's like, so like, is it the hat? Like, do women not wear hats?
Kimono on. I also don't think Kenneth.
Also, most of the kimonos, they're kind of gender neutral at times.
I have no idea how accurately anything about Japan was portrayed in that movie. It's from 2007 and Kenneth Branagh made it. I'm going to go out on a limb and say not at all.
I would agree.
Because also, if you want to set it in Japan, you don't need to make it white people in Japan. Like, it could just be Japanese.
I thought that was what they were going to do. Like, I had seen that Butterface was on the cover, but I was like, okay, well, maybe there's just like a bunch of people there, and she's just like the odd one out. Nope.
It's like in the one hand, okay, good. We didn't like do fucking yellow face and pretend they were Japanese. But again, this active choice to go into a Japanese setting and make all the aesthetics and cultural choices Japanese, but then have a white cast and explain away that they're white because there's some fictional colony of white people. Like, also, if you're a fictional colony of white people, why would it even like matter who your duke was? That's not your country. Also, I don't like that it even, I don't know, it started like before the play starts. Like, it starts with them at a kabuki show and then they like break in. And I remember for a split second, I thought I'd put on the wrong movie for us because it started and it was like, Japanese like flute music, like, and then it was like a dream in Japan. And I was like, a what? And it was
I was like, what's happening?
And then when it turned into a musical at the end for no reason, and there was a full-blown musical number as they skipped back to the palace, and then they
ran all the way back,
and then they turned into a painting on the wall, and it's like you just know Kenneth Branagh was like, I did something.
He thought he was up to something. He was like, this is good.
Yeah, I mean, again, it wasn't the worst one we'd ever watched. That's definitely reserved for
the Henrys.
The Henrys are the worst, but
and the two stage versions that we watched.
Those since we were just watching stage versions, we weren't watching any.
But
I found it harder because they cut down for a runtime. Obviously, they didn't want a 3-hour movie, but I felt like the stories were cut down unequally. Like, I feel like they should have just like, if they were going to cut it down so much, just cut out the Touchstone and Audrey thing altogether. Because that felt shoved in there randomly. Because like it's like they were with Touchstone, and then he was just kind of like deuces. We didn't see him for half the movie. He showed up randomly again with Audrey, and it was like, again, like just I feel like you could have like cut his character out altogether, or just had him just hang out with them, rewrite it somehow, or just commit. making a 3-hour movie. Like, it's a Shakespeare thing. People know what they came to see.
Yeah.
Or don't add like a 20-minute intro sequence.
You know, so long. For what?
Like, is Orlando like in the play, you know, fights his brother, and then in this they were like, what if he fought a sumo wrestler? And everyone was like,
what was that choice?
And then
there are rules with that, and like
also, and then the costuming is like, they were dressed, the women like Celia and Rosalind were dressed like it was the 19th century, like early 1850s or something, with those dresses and bustles. But then their hair was down and they're like sleeping on the floor. Because, you know, clearly Kenneth Branagh was like, oh, they don't use furniture in Japan. And it's like, they use furniture sometimes, Kenneth. Like, it's like, yes, I looked it up while we were watching it, that it is like a respected practice to not use furniture all the time in Japan, to sit on the floor. So there were instances in that where it would have made sense that they were on the floor. But there was times where just like Celia and Rosalind were just like laying on the floor. And I was like, I mean, I think they had beds. I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
You could just tell it was like the tackiest white person gaze of an Asian story. And there's like, no,
it's not necessary.
There's literally no reason for it.
There's like I understand if you want to do it like that is your culture and you're like, I want to do something new with it.
Yeah,
go for it. Kenneth Branagh, this white man does not need to go and like take other people and like do it when he's not even going to add anything new to the story or anything with the culture.
And again, it'd be one thing if like you were like, okay, we're going to do we're going to do A Midsummer Night's Dream, but instead of it being in England countryside, we're going to set it in like Kenya, or we're going to set it in Mexico, and we're going to have actors of color, and we're going to match the costumes and the aesthetic to an accurate, respectful portrayal of that culture. Like, this would have been genuinely, I think, interesting if it was a completely Asian cast, and they did, because like I'm gonna guess no research was done into the set dress. Like, obviously, I don't know watching if that was correct either. But I remember
I just gotta say, like, I feel like just perhaps maybe like Kenneth isn't the best person to be doing it, and like.
My sister was like, him in Harry Potter 2 was typecasting. Like, he is Gilderoy Lockhart. I was explaining the plot of this to my sister because she loves this play. And she was like, what version did you watch? And I said, 2007. And she said, oh, I haven't seen that one. And I said, and you don't need to. And I walked her through what happened. And she was like, why would they just make it about white people in Japan? I was like, well, Kenneth Branagh wrote and directed it. And my sister said, well, that's why. It was so dumb. It was so dumb. And
I liked his version of
Much Ado, Hamlet, right? Hamlet,
Much Ado, and then
Hamlet.
But because he just kept with what he knew, he stayed and he just did.
You want to know another classic that he ruined was Frankenstein. His is called like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which like some audacity to call it that, and then it's just a mess. He needs to fucking chill. He had no business doing this. It had that thing at the beginning where it was like the spice trade is big. Like, I guess that was supposed to be
nothing to do with the whole movie.
I think that's why we were supposed to believe there were all these white people in a colony in Japan, was because of the spice trade. I'm like, that's not how the spice trade worked.
It was almost just like not necessary.
It also was just kind of like as if to say that we're rooting for colonizers, but which then it also made no sense because they were like, okay, so these white people have colonized this place in Japan, but also Black people are openly in power. Pick what? So like it wasn't rainbow casting because there were literally no Asian people in predominant roles in this.
It was like, a weird choice considering they're set there. Like what?
Like, I think Phoebe was Asian, I mean, or presenting as Asian. I don't know if that actress was or not. But again, like, she has, like, 5 lines and is, like, a peasant person they met in the woods. Like, none of the,
it's just like, weird that, like, you wouldn't address it if you're going to set it there.
You're going to set it there and you're going to be like, it's a spice trade. That's why the white people are here. But also Black people are nobles. But also there's no Asian people to be seen. It's like, what?
Like, why would there not be any Asian people? If anything, put the Asian people in power. It would make a lot of sense.
I honestly just think from now on, like, all Shakespeare adaptations should be rainbow cast. Like, there is literally no reason for the race to apply at all in these. And I can't think of a single one we've watched where that's been the case, where they've, like, this, I don't count this as rainbow casting. Like, it was somewhat diversely cast, but it's also just offensive in the like essentially Asian fishing that they did putting it there. Yeah, I genuinely thought I put on the wrong movie for a hot second. Like the first 10 minutes, I was like, is this As You Like It?
I was just kind of like, I don't recognize this.
I Googled while we were watching. I got on my other computer and was like, why is the 2007 As You Like It in Japan? Because I was so confused. I was like, why does this look like a samurai film? Anyway. I also like the fact that it just started with kabuki theater. Like, again, Kenneth Branagh was like, look at me go. I'm cultured, worldly. Well, is there anything else you want to say before I introduce next month's play?
I don't think so. It was a fun play that we read this month. I enjoyed it.
It's definitely one of my favorites of all time that we've done. So next month for June, we'll be reading Othello, which was at the time actually, we'll talk more about it, but it was a big deal at the time because it was one of the first pieces of theater that had a Black character as the lead, because Othello is specifically a Black man in this, which was a big deal. I don't know if you've ever seen the show Dickinson, but there's a scene where they're doing Othello in their like Shakespeare club, and the Dickens have a house butler. It's this Black guy who works in the stable. I forgot his name, but he comes in. They're like, "You should read with us." And he's like, "No, it's okay." And there's like a really rich, like bratty, prejudiced girl in the group. And to show how clueless people were back then, she's like, "Well, of course he should read. Othello is Black." And the girl's like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah, he's Black." And the girl's like, "I disagree." And Emily Dickinson's like, "You can't disagree. It's in the text." I didn't realize he was Black at first either, because they call him the Moor, and I didn't know that's what that meant back then. So fun fact, kids, when you read it, that's what it means. I was like, he's from Scotland? Why does that matter? That's what I thought it meant, because like the Moors, because I'm clueless. Yeah. Our readings and such. Let me get out the calendar. So our live reading of Othello will be Friday, June 11th at 9 p.m. EST. The following week will be movie night. We're going to watch the 2000s movie with Julia Stiles. It's a modern adaptation. And then the 25th at 8 p.m. EST will be a discussion of Othello here on this channel. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at @bard_book to keep up with all things Othello and Shakespearean. And we hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for reading with us.
Yes, thanks for reading with us, and we will see you next month.
Bye.
Bye. Shakespeare was smart.
Smart.